The wire cutters clicked through the Montana night with devastating finality. The thick phone line serving the isolated cabin fell lifeless to the frost-covered ground. Seconds later, the main breaker on the utility pole was thrown, and the single light glowing from the second-story window, flickering alone amid the endless wilderness, died instantly. Have you ever wondered what happens when you're forced to confront your greatest fear? I discovered the answer on a frigid October night when darkness came not just from the sky, but from the desperate souls who thought I had something worth stealing. The mountain silence wrapped around Catherine Harlow's cabin like a familiar shawl. At 58, Kate had grown accustomed to the particular quiet that came with isolation. The kind of quiet that allowed her to hear her own thoughts, sometimes too clearly. Tonight, as the lamp on her desk suddenly went dark, those thoughts immediately sharpened into alert awareness. Power outages weren't unusual in this remote stretch of Montana wilderness, but this felt different. Kate's instincts, honed by decades of studying predator behavior, registered the wrongness immediately. She set down her research journal with deliberate calm and glanced at the massive form curled on the hand-woven rug beside her bed. Timber's ice-blue eyes were already open, his enormous head lifted, ears pricked forward in silent attention. No growl, no whine, just the focused alertness of an apex predator sensing a disturbance in his territory. "You feel it too, don't you, old friend?" Kate whispered. The wolf dog's eyes met hers with an intelligence that still astonished her, even after 3 years together. Standing nearly 3 feet at the shoulder with a midnight black coat that absorbed shadows, Timber was 85% gray wolf and 15% German Shepherd, according to the genetic tests. To the small community of Cedar Falls 15 miles away, he was a dangerous anomaly. To Kate, he was the only reason she hadn't followed her husband and daughter into oblivion after their plane crashed 2 years ago. Before the accident, Kate had built a distinguished career as an animal psychologist specializing in trauma rehabilitation for predatory species. She'd traveled the world, published groundbreaking research, and lectured at prestigious universities. Then came the call no one is ever prepared for. The small plane carrying her husband Michael and their daughter Sarah had disappeared from radar over the Bitterroot Range. The search found only wreckage scattered across an unforgiving mountainside. For 6 months afterward, Kate barely left her bedroom. The grief was a physical weight that made even breathing an exhausting task. If not for Timber's insistent presence, his need for food, exercise, and connection, she might have simply faded away. On her darkest night when she'd contemplated joining her family in death, it was Timber who'd placed his massive head in her lap, his intelligent eyes somehow communicating that she was still needed, still vital to at least one living being on this earth. Kate moved silently to the window, careful to stay beside rather than in front of it. Through the frost-edged glass, she could make out the familiar landscape of pines and aspens, their branches silvered by moonlight. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet the absence of normal night sounds, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of nocturnal creatures, spoke volumes. The framed photographs lining her bedroom walls stared back at her in the darkness. Her husband, teaching their daughter to fish. The 3 of them on expedition in Yellowstone. Kate receiving her doctorate. A life extinguished in a single radio transmission. Small aircraft down in the Bitterroot Range. No survivors. Her father Gregory had moved in afterward, his weathered rancher's hands somehow finding strength to hold her together when grief threatened to tear her apart. But his failing heart had taken him to Denver 6 weeks ago for extended treatment, leaving Kate truly alone. Almost alone. The sound of breaking glass downstairs shattered the silence. Kate didn't flinch. Instead, she placed her hand on Timber's neck, feeling the tension thrumming through his powerful frame. "Quiet," she whispered. though the command was unnecessary. Timber understood stealth as instinctively as breathing. What frightened me most wasn't the strangers in my home, but what they might do to Timber if they felt threatened. In that moment, I realized I was prepared to do anything, to protect the last living creature who gave my existence meaning. Voices drifted up through the floorboards. Male, hushed, confident. At least 3 distinct tones. Kate's mind analyzed possibilities with practiced clarity. Not lost hikers. Not game wardens. These were intruders with purpose. Footsteps moved through her home below, accompanied by the harsh beams of flashlights. Kate crept to her bedroom door and cracked it open, straining to hear their words. Exactly like Chen said, isolated place. Old man's in the hospital, woman alone. The voice was gruff, mature, carrying the clipped cadence of military training. "Where's the safe, Michael? I'm not spending all night in this place." A younger voice, impatient and rough. "We'll find it, Ryan. These researcher types always have money stashed. Insurance payouts from the crash, grant money. Just stay focused." The third voice, female and accented, broke in. "Remember, we're here for the money, not to hurt anyone, in and out." Kate's blood ran cold. They knew about her. Knew her father was gone. Knew about the crash. This wasn't random. Someone had given these people specific information about her life, her vulnerabilities. Someone named Chen. The footsteps reached the bottom of the staircase. "Let's check upstairs. If there's a safe, it'll be in a bedroom or office." Kate had perhaps 30 seconds before they discovered her. She weighed options rapidly, each worse than the last. Hide? They'd search everything. Escape through the window? The second-story drop would likely break her leg, and she wouldn't abandon Timber anyway. As the first footstep creaked on the bottom stair, Kate realized her advantage. They expected to find a helpless, frightened widow. They had no idea she lived with 120 pounds of apex predator who would die before letting anyone harm her. Kate straightened her shoulders, settled her breathing, and prepared to face what came through that door. Timber moved to her side, a shadow made flesh, his presence somehow both comforting and terrifying. The bedroom door burst open without ceremony, revealing 3 silhouettes against the hallway darkness. The first was tall and lean, perhaps mid-40s, with close-cropped gray-streaked hair and the controlled movements of someone accustomed to command. Michael Reardon, Kate presumed. The second, Ryan, was younger, stockier, with nervous energy radiating from his hunched shoulders. The third figure surprised Kate. A woman, probably Latina, who hung back slightly, her expression hidden in shadow. All 3 froze when their flashlight beams illuminated Kate standing beside her bed. And Timber. The massive wolf dog stood perfectly still, his form catching the light like a dark monument. "Jesus Christ," Ryan whispered, his hand immediately moving toward his waistband. "Michael, that's a goddamn wolf." Michael extended his arm to stop his partner's motion. His eyes never left Timber, studying the animal with the careful assessment of someone who understood predators. "Easy, Ryan. Nobody moves until we figure out what we're dealing with." Kate stepped forward, her chin raised despite her racing heart. "You're in my house," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You need to leave now." Ryan's laugh held no humor. "Oh, we will, sweetheart, right after you show us where the money is." His hand still hovered near his concealed weapon. "But first, put that monster on a leash or—" "He's not a monster," Kate interrupted, "and he doesn't need a leash. He stays with me because he chooses to." Michael studied this tableau, the older woman, and the massive animal that obeyed her without visible commands, and his expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "Interesting dynamic you two have," he said slowly. "Very interesting." The third intruder stepped forward, her flashlight beam lowered slightly. Dr. Harlow? Dr. Catherine Harlow? Kate's eyes narrowed. Who's asking? I saw you speak. Denver Convention Center 2019, Wildlife Psychology Symposium. The woman's voice held a note of genuine respect. Your work with traumatized predators was revolutionary. Michael shot the woman an irritated glance. Elena, now isn't the time for a fan club meeting. Elena Martinez. The name clicked into place in Kate's memory. She wasn't just an audience member at that symposium. Elena had been a promising veterinary student who had asked thoughtful questions during the Q&A, and later approached Kate with specific inquiries about trauma patterns in abused wolves. Kate had even written her a recommendation letter for an internship. Life takes strange turns, doesn't it, Elena? Kate said softly. I remember you. Brilliant thesis on comparative trauma responses in captive versus wild-born predators. I never imagined our next meeting would be like this. Something like shame flickered across Elena's face before she looked away. I didn't have many options after my student visa expired, she said quietly. My mother's medical bills in Mexico? Enough, Michael interrupted sharply. He stepped forward, taking control of the situation. Here's how this works. You're going to take us through this house room by room until we find what we came for. Your companion will stay calm and quiet because if he doesn't... He nodded toward Ryan, whose fingers still itched toward his weapon. My associate will ensure he's no longer a concern. The threat hit Kate like a physical blow, but she didn't allow it to show on her face. Instead, she nodded slowly. Fine, I'll cooperate, but Timber comes with me. They began a tense procession through the house, Kate leading, Michael following close behind, Elena next, and Ryan bringing up the rear. Timber padded silently beside Kate, his massive form a constant reassurance against her leg. As they searched the living room, Kate observed their interactions, her psychologist's mind automatically analyzing behavior patterns. Michael moved with military precision, his eyes constantly scanning exits and entry points. His slight limp and occasional wince when turning quickly suggested an old injury, possibly to his right hip or leg. Most telling was the way he startled at small sounds, his pupils dilating. Classic hypervigilance consistent with PTSD. Ryan's movements were erratic, his nervous energy manifesting in unnecessary roughness as he upended cushions and yanked books from shelves. His hands trembled slightly. Withdrawal symptoms, perhaps, or simple fear masked as aggression. Most intriguing was Elena, who seemed to examine the photographs on the mantel with genuine interest. Lingering on images of Kate with her husband and daughter, their faces alight with happiness before tragedy struck. Nothing here, Ryan muttered, kicking aside a stack of research journals with unnecessary force. Keep looking, Michael ordered, but Kate could see doubt creeping into his expression. The house, while comfortable, didn't show signs of the wealth their informant had promised. Everything was well-made but practical, the home of people who valued knowledge over luxury. As they moved through the kitchen, Michael's flashlight beam caught Kate's face at an angle that highlighted the silver threading through her auburn hair, the fine lines radiating from her eyes, marks of a life fully lived, now diminished by grief. You lost someone, he said, not a question but an observation. Everyone in this house, Kate replied evenly. My husband and daughter, 2 years ago. Plane crash in the Bitterroot Range. Something flickered across Michael's face. Recognition, perhaps even empathy. He unconsciously rubbed his leg. Afghanistan, third tour. IED took out our transport. The words came out clipped, almost involuntary. Lost my whole unit. Only survivor. I'm sorry, Kate said, and meant it. The animal psychologist in her recognized trauma regardless of species. We need to check upstairs again, Ryan interrupted, impatience sharpening his voice. The old man's room, the office. Somewhere there's a safe. As they climbed the stairs, Kate noticed Michael's limp becoming more pronounced. The pain from old wounds often worsened in stressful situations, physical echoes of psychological trauma. In her father's bedroom, Ryan became increasingly agitated as another search revealed nothing of value. Chen promised us a score here. Insurance money, family heirlooms, research funds. Billy Chen is a liar, Elena said suddenly, her voice tight with anger. Just like he lied about the last job. How many more times will you believe him, Michael? We need this money, Elena. You know why. Michael's voice held an edge of desperation. The treatment center costs $5,000 up front. No payment plans, no exceptions. Treatment center? Kate asked quietly. Michael's jaw tightened, but Elena answered. His son, 16, addiction, third relapse. The VA won't cover the private facility, but it's the only one with an opening. Maybe there is no money, Kate said quietly. Maybe the worst loss isn't things or money. Maybe it's continuing to live when everyone you love is gone. The three intruders stared at her, momentarily silenced by the raw truth in her words. 2 years ago, after the crash, I sat in my bedroom for 6 months. Barely ate, barely slept. The only reason I didn't end it was Timber. Kate's voice grew stronger. He dragged me back to life, literally some days, pulling the blankets off me, forcing me outside, demanding I engage with the world. Kate met Michael's eyes directly. You think I'm afraid of you? I've already lost everything that matters. The only thing I have left worth protecting is standing right beside me. Timber, as if understanding her words, pressed closer to her leg. Enough of this philosophical bullshit, Ryan snapped, striding toward Kate with menace in his eyes. Where's the safe? Where's the money? Last chance before things get ugly. Timber's rumble began deep in his chest. Not quite a growl, but a promise of what could come. Ryan froze, suddenly aware of the predator tracking his every movement. Ryan, back off, Michael ordered sharply. Dr. Sace. Harlow, I think it's time we checked your office. Kate led them to the final room, her late husband's study, preserved almost exactly as he'd left it. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with research journals, field guides, and academic texts. Michael's desk sat in the center, scattered with the papers he'd been reviewing before that final flight. Elena moved immediately to examine the collection of rare Audubon prints displayed in protective frames. These are originals, she whispered, genuine awe in her voice. My husband collected them, Kate explained. Over 20 years. Ryan snorted dismissively, but Michael approached the prints with newfound interest. These would be worth more than you'd get for them selling them quickly, Kate finished. The market for legitimate Audubon originals is small, regulated, and requires provenance. Michael continued his methodical search of the room, running his hands along wall panels behind the bookshelves. Kate watched with sinking heart as he paused at the bookshelf containing her husband's most treasured volumes. His fingers traced the edge of one section, applying pressure to a seemingly innocent piece of trim. The hidden panel swung open with a soft click, revealing a cavity about the size of a shoebox. Well, well, Michael murmured, shining his flashlight into the space. Inside were neat stacks of documents, a small wooden box, and several rubber-banded bundles of cash. Ryan whooped with triumph. Finally! Kate watched helplessly as Michael removed items from the compartment. Insurance policies, birth certificates, her husband's will, the deed to the property. Then the wooden box containing her mother's pearls, her grandmother's wedding ring, and other irreplaceable family pieces. Finally, the cash. $5,340 in various bills, her emergency fund for when her father returned. Now we're talking, Ryan said, reaching for the money. Michael examined the documents, his flashlight beam moving across official letterheads. Life insurance policy, he muttered. Payable to Catherine Harlow, $200,000. He looked up sharply. Where's the money? In a trust, Kate explained. I can't access it until specific conditions are met. College tuition for grandchildren I'll never have. Medical expenses. Property maintenance. My father controls the trust, and after him, the family attorney in Missoula. Michael set the papers aside and opened the wooden jewelry box. Antique pieces, he observed. Not worth what Chen promised, but something. They're family heirlooms, Kate said, her voice finally breaking. My grandmother's wedding ring. My mother's pearls from when she married my father. I can do whatever I want, Michael replied coldly. You seem to forget that you're not in a position to negotiate. Timber sensed the shift in Kate's emotional state and moved closer, his massive frame pressing against her leg. The contact steadied her, but it also drew Ryan's attention. I'm getting tired of pretending that thing isn't dangerous, Ryan said, his voice taking on an ugly tone. Maybe we should deal with it now. Touch him, and you'll regret it, Kate said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Ryan laughed. You're going to stop me? You in what army, old lady? She doesn't need an army, Michael said thoughtfully, studying Timber. She has something special here. He turned to Kate. This animal, he's not just a pet, is he? He's something special. Probably worth more than anything else in this house to the right buyer. Kate remained silent, feeling the trap in his words. Timber wasn't just her companion. He was a symbol of everything the authorities feared. Wild nature refusing to be tamed, existing in that liminal space that made bureaucrats nervous. The sound of an approaching vehicle cut through the tense silence. All four occupants of the study froze, heads turning toward the windows as headlight beams swept across the pine trees outside. Who is that? Michael hissed, grabbing Kate's arm and pressing his gun to her temple. I don't know, Kate gasped truthfully. Maybe Sheriff Donovan doing a welfare check. Ryan moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Old woman in a pickup. Looks about 70. Just a neighbor, Kate breathed. Martha Lawson. She checks on me sometimes. Outside, they heard a truck door slam shut. Footsteps crunched across the gravel driveway. Then a voice, weathered but strong. Kate, you there, honey? Saw the power was out and wanted to make sure you're okay. Martha's footsteps moved across the front porch. They could hear her trying the door, finding it unlocked from the intruder's entry. Kate, your truck's here, but the house is dark. Are you hurt? What Kate couldn't see from her position was Martha Lawson's reaction to the unfamiliar sedan parked beside Kate's truck. The 70-year-old woman had immediately noted the out-of-state plates, the rental car company sticker, and the fresh tire tracks in the mud. More concerning was the cut telephone wire dangling from the pole. Martha didn't call out again after her initial questions. Instead, she silently retrieved the shotgun from her truck and the satellite phone from her glove compartment. 3 minutes later, she had contacted Sheriff Donovan with a terse message about suspected intruders at the Harlow place, then positioned herself with clear sightlines to both the front and back entrances. Inside, Ryan looked at Michael with panicked eyes. We need to get out of here. Shut up, Michael snapped, but Kate could see the situation spiraling beyond his control. He pressed the gun harder against her temple. Call her off, or I swear to God! What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Kate would struggle to sequence the events properly. Timber, who had been watching with predatory intelligence, made his decision. With no warning except a barely audible intake of breath, he launched himself not at Michael, which would have risked Kate's life, but at Ryan, who stood nearest to the window with his hand hovering near his own weapon. 120 pounds of muscle and bone hit Ryan in the chest, driving him backward. His gun went flying, skittering across the wooden floor. Books cascaded down around them as Ryan screamed, a sound of pure terror that cut through the night. Michael spun toward the noise, his gun swinging away from Kate's head for just an instant, long enough for Elena to throw herself forward, grabbing his wrist and forcing the weapon upward. A shot exploded into the ceiling, raining plaster. "Timber, hold," Kate commanded. And the wolf dog immediately released Ryan, backing away while maintaining his aggressive stance. The front door crashed open downstairs, followed by Martha's voice. "Federal Bureau of Investigation retired. Drop your weapons." Martha Lawson had spent 30 years with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit before retiring to Montana for its solitude and natural beauty. She had moved into the property neighboring Kate's shortly after the plane crash, drawn by the opportunity to help a grieving woman regain her footing in the world. What had begun as neighborly concern had evolved into genuine friendship. Now, as she ascended the stairs with the practiced caution of someone who had conducted hundreds of armed interventions, Martha's mind was calculating risks and probabilities with the precision that had made her legendary within the Bureau. "Kate," she called. "I've already contacted Sheriff Donovan. He's 8 minutes out with backup." Martha appeared in the doorway, her shotgun held with the steady hands and perfect form of a woman who had never lost her edge despite retirement. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her weathered face calm but alert. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, retired," Martha announced, as if she were introducing herself at a church social. "But this Remington still works just fine. Hands where I can see them, gentlemen. And lady," she added, noting Elena with slight surprise. 3 months later, Kate sat in the same study where her life had nearly ended. But everything was different now. The bullet hole in the ceiling had been patched and painted. New books filled the shelves where others had been damaged. Most importantly, the room no longer felt haunted by violence. It had reclaimed its identity as a place of learning and discovery. Sheriff Donovan sat across from her, not in an official capacity but as a friend delivering good news. "The county board voted unanimously," he said, sliding an official document across the polished wood surface. "Timber has been officially classified as a therapeutic companion animal rather than a wild predator. The designation comes with conditions, but it means he can stay with you legally." Kate's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the paperwork. After 3 months of hearings, evaluations, and bureaucratic wrangling, she had almost given up hope. "What changed their minds?" she asked, though she suspected the answer. "Several things," Donovan replied with a smile. Martha's testimony carried significant weight. Turns out 30 years in the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit gives you some pull. But honestly, what sealed it was the psychological evaluation and the therapy program you've developed. Dr. Santos made a compelling case for Timber's exceptional emotional intelligence and the therapeutic benefit he provides. Through the window, Kate could see Timber in the newly expanded enclosure her father had built upon his return from the hospital. The space was 4 times larger than the original pen, complete with natural obstacles and a small creek. The gate stood open. Timber wasn't imprisoned there, but it provided security when visitors needed reassurance. The program Kate had developed over the past 3 months had surprised even her with its success. Starting with just 2 traumatized veterans referred by Dr. Santos, word had spread rapidly. Now, twice weekly, a small group gathered at the Harlow property for what they called wolf therapy. The veterans, many suffering from severe PTSD, found something in Timber's presence that traditional therapy couldn't provide. Perhaps it was the non-judgmental companionship of a fellow survivor, or the comfort of connecting with a creature who lived perpetually in the present moment. Whatever the cause, the results were undeniable. Participants reported significant reductions in flashbacks, improved sleep, and decreased hypervigilance. For the first time in years, Kate felt purposeful, using her professional training to help others find their way back from trauma, just as Timber had helped her. "There's more," Donovan added. "Michael Reardon pleaded guilty to all charges last week, armed robbery, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. But here's the interesting part. The judge agreed to include mandatory psychological treatment for his PTSD as part of the sentence. Kate nodded thoughtfully. And the others? Ryan Cooper got 15 years. He had prior convictions. Elena Martinez received a reduced sentence in exchange for her testimony. She'll serve 3 years, with possibility of parole after 18 months. The front door opened, and Kate heard her father's familiar footsteps in the hallway. Gregory Harlow moved more slowly since his heart surgery, but his spirit remained strong. He appeared carrying a tray with coffee mugs and his characteristic gentle smile. "Sheriff, good to see you," Gregory said warmly. "I trust you're bringing Kate good news." "The best," Donovan confirmed. "Timber stays, and Kate's therapy program gets official recognition." "Tell him about the letter," Gregory urged, settling into his favorite chair. Kate hesitated, then reached into her desk drawer and withdrew an envelope. "This came yesterday," she said, "from Michael Reardon." She unfolded the single page covered in careful handwriting. "Dr. Harlow, I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. What I did to you was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that meeting you and Timber changed something in me. During our interaction for the first time since returning from Afghanistan, I felt truly seen. Not as a threat, not as a broken soldier, but as a human being in pain. The therapy program at the correctional facility has helped me understand my PTSD. Doesn't define me or excuse my actions. It's simply part of my story now, as your loss is part of yours. I wanted you to know that my son Alex is now 6 months sober. The court ordered the VA to cover his treatment after all. The money I would have stolen from you wouldn't have saved him anyway. Only proper care and support could do that. I hope someday to make amends in some small way. Until then, know that your work matters. It reaches people even when they come to you with the worst intentions. Michael Reardon." Kate refolded the letter carefully. "Elena has also written," she added. "When she's released, she wants to volunteer with the therapy program. She's completing a veterinary technician certification while incarcerated." Martha knocked lightly on the open door before entering, carrying a plate of her famous blueberry muffins. Over the past months, the former FBI agent had become Kate's closest friend and staunchest advocate. "I heard we're celebrating today," Martha announced, setting down the muffins. "And about time, too." The early afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the silver in Martha's hair and the weathered lines of her face. A roadmap of a life fully lived. Kate had come to cherish their evening conversations on the porch, where Martha occasionally shared carefully sanitized stories from her days profiling some of the country's most dangerous criminals. "The county has approved funding for an expansion of the therapy program," Kate said, passing Martha the official letter that had arrived alongside Timber's certification. "We can accommodate twice as many veterans starting next month." "Not just veterans," Martha corrected with a smile. "I spoke with Dr. Santos yesterday. She wants to send some of her trauma survivors from domestic violence cases. Apparently, there's research suggesting the same therapeutic benefits apply." As the afternoon continued, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced since before the crash. A sense of purpose, of belonging. Grief would always be part of her landscape, but it no longer defined her entire horizon. Timber appeared at the door, his ice-blue eyes scanning the room before settling on Kate with unmistakable devotion. She gestured to him, and he patted over to rest his massive head on her knee. "You know," Donovan said, watching their interaction, "I used to think keeping a wolf dog was the most dangerous choice a person could make. Now, I think letting you two get separated would have been the real tragedy." Outside, the Montana sunset painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Kate felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had survived loss, trauma, and violence. She had found a new family, not of blood, but of choice. Her father, Martha, the traumatized veterans who found healing through timber. Even Elena and Michael, in their way, had become part of her story of redemption. As Timber's warm weight settled more comfortably against her leg, Kate smiled and realized that sometimes we find our greatest strength when facing our greatest fears. And sometimes, the most profound bonds come not from whom we're born to, but from who stands beside us when darkness falls. What unexpected friendship or connection has surprised you with its strength in your life? How have you found healing through helping others? Share your story in the comments below.